Hello, my name is Matt Hayes, and today I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the Synoptic Problem, specifically focusing on the literary relationships and source theories behind Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Before we dive in, though, we need a firm foundation. What are the Synoptic Gospels? Well, the Synoptic Gospels are the first three books of the New Testament, and the word synoptic derives from the Greek word synoptikos, which means seen together. This is perfect because these three books share a common structure and narrative of Jesus' life. The fourth of the Gospels, though, John, isn't included in the Synoptics because it's a vastly different account in terms of structure and content. Roughly about 90% of John's content is completely unique to his Gospel, whereas Matthew, Mark, and Luke, however, share a strikingly similar structure, flow, and narrative. This is why they are the Synoptic Gospels. For example, if you look at the story of Jesus cleansing the leper in Mark 1, Matthew 8, and Luke 5, in parallel comparison, you will see almost verbatim wording alongside some small variations in detail. And this brings us to the core question. What is the synoptic problem? Well, simply put, it's the challenge of explaining the exact nature of these striking similarities and differences. How did they end up sharing the exact same order of events and direct vocabulary in some passages while heavily diverging, leaving things out, or changing sequence in others? To solve this, we need to look at three main questions. First, who wrote their account first? Second, who borrowed from whom? Because of the shared language in the synoptics, we can make an educated assumption based on research that the synoptic authors borrowed from each other. And third, were there any additional sources used? When all three gospels share content, we call this triple tradition. There's about 400 verses in the Gospel of Mark that also appear in Matthew and Luke, but there's also about 250 verses that appear in Matthew and Luke, but never show up in the Gospel of Mark. We call this double tradition. To explain double tradition, many scholars suggest a hypothetical lost source of Jesus' sayings called Q, short for Quelle, which is the German word for source. So, who wrote first? Well, there's three main theories that we need to look at here. First is Matthean priority, championed by early church tradition and defended by J.J. Griesbach. In 1783, J.J. Griesbach created the Griesbach hypothesis, which claims that Matthew wrote first, Luke copied and adapted Matthew for a Gentile audience, and Mark later used both to create a shorter Cliff Notes version of the Gospel. This theory eliminates the need for a Q source. Second, Markan priority, which is the more widely accepted theory among modern scholars. It argues that Mark wrote first, Matthew and Luke independently used Mark as their primary resource, and because Matthew and Luke share material that's not found in Mark, this theory relies heavily on the existence of Q source. Finally, there's Lucan priority, which is a less common theory primarily supported by a few researchers in Israel, which argues that Luke wrote first, Mark adapted Luke, and then Matthew used both. So let's expand on how these authors actually utilize their sources. Aside from Griesbach, another model that rejects the Q source is the Farrer theory, which was developed by Austin Farrer in the 1950s. He argued for Markan priority, that Mark wrote first, Matthew expanded on Mark, and then Luke used both Mark and Matthew as his sources. On the other side, we have the more widely accepted models that include Q. The two-source theory that states that Matthew and Luke independently used two sources, Mark and the Q source. The four-source theory takes this a step even further. You could say that two-source theory walked so four-source theory could run. It adds two more sources, M material, which is material exclusive to Matthew, and L material, which is material exclusive to Luke. This beautifully shows the literary relationship of the synoptic authors. Here are the diagrams of the four theories that we've discussed, and you can see with the arrows the different literary relationships that each synoptic author had with the other. You can also see in four-source theory in the bottom right-hand corner there the unique material used by Matthew and Luke labeled M and L. So as we wrap up, why does any of this matter to us as believers? Well, think of it this way. If I tell you the best pizza in the world is a hand-tossed crust with Italian sausage and onions, I have to back that up. So I'd explain how I work at a pizza restaurant and how the spice of the sausage perfectly balances the sweetness of the onions. That evidence supports the claim and makes it believable. The same applies to our faith. The evidence used to answer the synoptic problem proves that the differences between the Gospels are not errors or contradictions. Instead, they give us distinct, authentic perspectives or angles of the person Jesus. The similarities show a real literary relationship that aligns with how first century historical biographies were written, and it proves that we have multiple eyewitness accounts written within living memory that back our faith, supported by both biblical and secular history. Thank you for your time.